Let all of you know what will happen now. As indicated, Speaker-elect, not quite Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson will go and deliver remarks. He will be sworn in by the Dean of the House. Then the Speaker will be administering the oath to members. Let's keep in mind that this is the beginning of the 119th Congress, and it's off to quite a start. But there are new members among them there on the House floor who have yet to be sworn in for the first time ever. And of course, no one has been sworn in to officially start the 119th Congress, but they were allowed to vote in this regard for Speaker of the House. So that will be done by Speaker Johnson. So we're going to be watching for all of this. It is a bipartisan delegation, if you will, that will be escorting him there into the middle of the chamber, and that is where he will again deliver his remarks.
Okay, so the Trump legal team just got absolutely destroyed in court. And this is not some procedural footnote that gets buried on page 12 of the legal filings. This is a federal judge forcing members of Trump's own inner circle to testify under oath in a case that was already moving toward conviction, and the implications here are massive. Now we're talking about a ruling that strips away one of the last protective barriers Trump's lawyers have been desperately trying to maintain, and it's happening at exactly the moment when the former president can least afford another legal catastrophe. This isn't just about one case anymore. This is about whether the walls are finally closing in on Trump in a way that even his most loyal allies can't spin away, and whether the judiciary is sending a signal that no one, not even a former president, not even his closest advisors, is above the law when it comes to answering questions under oath about potential criminal conduct. The judge's decision came down hard, it came down fast, and it came down in a way that legal experts are already calling a turning point in this entire saga. Now, before we get into the details of what just happened and why this could be the beginning of the end for Trump's legal strategy in this case, let's talk about something important. You're watching this right now because you want the truth. You want to understand what's really going on behind the headlines. And let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They're either sanitizing the story to protect Trump, or they're so focused on the spectacle that they miss the substance. That's why we built Politic Insane, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. We bring the news straight to you every single day. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe. All right, let's get back to the video. Here's what happened. A federal judge overseeing one of the criminal cases against Donald Trump issued a ruling that legal observers are calling a bombshell, and the core of it is this. Several members of Trump's legal team and inner circle are now compelled to testify under oath about conversations, strategy sessions, and actions they took during the period when Trump is alleged to have committed crimes. The judge didn't just suggest they testify. The judge ordered it, rejecting every single argument Trump's lawyers made about attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, and work product protection. The ruling is dozens of pages long, and it systematically dismantles each of the legal shields that Trump's team tried to hide behind. What makes this so devastating is that these aren't peripheral figures. These are people who were in the room when decisions were made, people who heard Trump's instructions directly, people who saw documents, who participated in meetings, who know exactly what Trump knew and when he knew it. And now they're going to have to talk about it under oath in front of a grand jury or at trial. And if they lie, they're facing perjury charges themselves. The judge made it very clear in the ruling that attorney-client privilege does not protect communications that were made in furtherance of a crime, and that executive privilege does not apply when the former president is the subject of a criminal investigation into his own conduct. This is the crime fraud exception in action, and the judge found that prosecutors had presented enough evidence to show that Trump and his lawyers may have crossed the line from legal advocacy into criminal conspiracy. The timing here is brutal for Trump. This case was already moving forward aggressively, with prosecutors signaling they have significant evidence of obstruction, witness tampering, and potentially conspiracy to defraud the United States. The grand jury has been hearing testimony for months, and insiders say the evidence is overwhelming. But Trump's legal strategy has always been to delay, to obfuscate, to claim privilege over everything, and to keep his inner circle from having to testify about what really happened. That strategy just collapsed. The judge's ruling means that the prosecution is about to get access to testimony that could directly contradict the public statements Trump and his lawyers have been making for months. It means the jury is going to hear from people who were there, who saw the documents being moved, who heard the conversations about how to respond to subpoenas, who participated in the meetings where Trump allegedly decided to ignore court orders and hide evidence. And here's the thing, these witnesses can't plead the Fifth if they're given immunity, which prosecutors are almost certainly prepared to offer. So even if some of these people want to protect Trump, they're not going to have a choice. They either testify truthfully or they go to prison for contempt or perjury. Now, let's talk about what led to this moment, because this didn't happen in a vacuum. The case in question involves allegations that Trump illegally retained classified documents after leaving office, obstructed justice by refusing to return them, ordered his staff to hide documents from federal investigators, and then lied to his own lawyers about what he had and where it was. Federal prosecutors have been building this case for over a year, and they have security footage, they have text messages, they have emails, and they have testimony from staffers who were directly involved in moving boxes of documents around Mar-a-Lago to keep them away from investigators. Trump's defense has been a mix of claiming he had the right to keep the documents, that he declassified everything, that the FBI raid was illegal, and that his lawyers didn't know what they were talking about. But as the case has progressed, it's become increasingly clear that Trump knew exactly what he had, that he was told repeatedly by his lawyers that he had to return the documents, and that he deliberately chose to defy subpoenas and court orders because he believed he was above the law. The key legal question that the judge had to decide was whether Trump's conversations with his lawyers were protected by attorney-client privilege. Normally, those conversations are sacred. A lawyer can't be forced to testify about what their client told them, and that's a bedrock principle of the legal system. But there's an exception, and it's a big one. If the client is using the lawyer to commit or cover up a crime, the privilege doesn't apply. This is called the crime-fraud exception, and it's been part of American law for over a century. The idea is simple. You can't use your lawyer as a shield to commit crimes. If you're asking your lawyer to help you destroy evidence, or if you're lying to your lawyer to get them to make false statements to investigators, or if you're using the lawyer as a conduit to coordinate a cover-up, then those communications aren't privileged, and that's exactly what the judge found here. The ruling states that prosecutors presented sufficient evidence to demonstrate that Trump was not seeking legal advice in good faith, but was instead attempting to use his attorneys to obstruct the investigation and conceal his possession of classified materials. The judge noted that Trump allegedly made false statements to his own lawyers, knowing they would then repeat those false statements to federal investigators, and that this conduct falls squarely within the crime-fraud exception. This is where it gets really bad for Trump, because the judge didn't just rule on one or two conversations. The judge ruled that a wide range of communications between Trump and his legal team are not protected, which means prosecutors can now ask about strategy sessions, about what Trump told his lawyers regarding the documents, about whether Trump instructed his lawyers to make certain arguments knowing they were false, and about whether Trump was coordinating with his lawyers to delay and obstruct the investigation. And here's the problem. If Trump's lawyers testify that he lied to them, or that he instructed them to make false statements, or that he told them to ignore subpoenas, that's game over. That's direct evidence of obstruction, of conspiracy, and potentially of perjury if Trump later made statements under oath that contradicted what he told his lawyers privately. Legal experts are already saying that this ruling could be the single most damaging development in any of the criminal cases against Trump, because it opens the door to testimony that would be nearly impossible for the defense to counter. But there's another layer to this that makes it even more significant, and that's the precedent it sets. This is a federal judge telling the world that being a former president does not insulate you from criminal investigation, that hiring expensive lawyers does not give you a license to commit crimes, and that the normal rules of attorney-client privilege do ultimately decide not to go through with it. Trump now knows that his own party is actively plotting against him. That changes everything. It means he can't trust his own caucus. It means every policy decision, every executive order, every public statement has to be calibrated not just to satisfy his base, but to avoid giving moderate Republicans another reason to abandon him. It means the White House will be in perpetual crisis management mode, constantly trying to prevent defections, constantly negotiating with lawmakers who have leverage, because they can credibly threaten to bring down the entire presidency. This is not how a functioning government operates. This is how a government in collapse operates. Third, consider the political implications heading into 2026. If House Republicans resign and Democrats take control, the entire narrative of the midterms changes. It's no longer about whether voters want to give Democrats control of Congress. It becomes a referendum on Trump's fitness for office. Democrats would use their new majority to hold hearing after hearing exposing every scandal, every alleged crime, every ethical lapse. They'd subpoena Trump's tax returns, his financial records, his communications with foreign leaders. They'd bring in witnesses who could testify about what really happened during key moments of Trump's presidency. And they'd build a case for impeachment that would dominate the news for months. Even if the Senate, still controlled by Republicans, refuses to convict Trump, the damage to his reputation and to the Republican brand would be enormous. Swing voters would see a president so toxic that his own party members resigned rather than serve under him. That's not a message Republicans can easily spin. Fourth, let's talk about the international dimension, because this is getting almost no attention in the mainstream press, but it's hugely important. America's allies are watching this very closely. European leaders have been privately expressing concerns about Trump's erratic behavior, his willingness to abandon long-standing alliances, and his apparent admiration for authoritarian leaders. If the U.S. government descends into chaos, if Trump is forced from office or clings to power despite mass resignations, it sends a message to the rest of the world that American democracy is unstable, that American commitments can't be trusted, and that American leadership is in decline. NATO allies are already hedging their bets, increasing their own defense spending and forming closer ties with each other independent of the United States. Asian allies like Japan and South Korea are reconsidering their reliance on American security guarantees. And adversaries like Russia and China are absolutely thrilled because a divided, dysfunctional America is an America that can't effectively counter their ambitions on the world stage. Fifth, think about the economic impact. Markets hate uncertainty, and right now, uncertainty is all we have. Investors don't know if Trump will finish his term. They don't know if the government will shut down because Congress can't function. They don't know if major policy initiatives from tax reform to infrastructure spending will ever get off the ground. That kind of uncertainty shows up in stock prices and bond yields and currency exchange rates. We're already seeing volatility. If the resignation threat becomes real, if the House flips to Democratic control, if impeachment proceedings begin in earnest, you could see a serious market correction, and that would hurt ordinary Americans, people who have retirement savings in the stock market, people whose jobs depend on business investment and consumer confidence, people who are already struggling with inflation and rising costs. This isn't just a political story, it's a story about the real-world consequences of political chaos. And here's something else to consider. If Trump is forced out, who takes over? The vice president, presumably. But what if the vice president is also implicated in some of these scandals? What if there are questions about their own conduct or their complicity in Trump's alleged wrongdoing? Then you're looking at a scenario where the Speaker of the House, currently a Democrat if the resignations happen, could potentially become president. That would be the ultimate nightmare scenario for Republicans. They would have effectively handed the presidency to the opposition party without even an election. It's hard to overstate how catastrophic that would be for the GOP, both politically and in terms of policy. Everything Trump has tried to accomplish, from conservative judicial appointments to deregulation to immigration enforcement, could be undone overnight by a Democratic president with full control of the House and significant leverage over the Senate. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this story is moving fast. Over the next few days and weeks, watch for several key indicators. First, watch whether any House Republicans start making public statements distancing themselves from Trump. If you see carefully worded speeches or op-eds where they talk about the rule of law, the Constitution, and their oath of office, that's a sign they're preparing the ground for a dramatic move. Second, watch for leaks about the internal GOP meetings. The more details that come out about who's involved and what they're planning, the more real this threat becomes. Third, watch Trump's response. If he starts lashing out at specific House members, if he threatens to primary them or support challengers, that could backfire spectacularly by hardening their resolve. On the other hand, if Trump tries to conciliate, if he starts making concessions or promises to moderate his behavior, that's a sign he's taking the threat seriously. Fourth, watch the Senate. If Senate Republicans start signaling that they might actually vote to convict Trump in an impeachment trial, that changes the entire calculation. Right now, most people assume the Senate would never remove Trump. But if House resignations create enough political pressure, if the evidence of wrongdoing becomes overwhelming, some Senate Republicans might decide that their own political survival depends on distancing themselves from Trump. And finally, watch the legal proceedings. Trump is facing multiple court cases right now, and any one of them could produce a bombshell ruling that accelerates this entire process. If a federal judge finds that Trump committed crimes in office, if new evidence emerges of obstruction or abuse of power, if the Supreme Court rules against Trump on a major constitutional question, that gives wavering Republicans the cover they need to act. They can say they're not driven by partisanship, they're driven by the facts and the law. That's a much easier political position to defend than simply admitting they want Trump gone because he's become a liability. So here's the bottom line. Donald Trump is facing the most serious threat to his presidency yet, and it's coming from inside his own party. House Republicans are privately discussing mass resignations as a way to force Trump from office without having to vote for impeachment. If even a small number of them follow through, it would flip control of the House to Democrats, trigger immediate impeachment proceedings, and create a constitutional crisis unlike anything we've seen in modern American history. The White House is in panic mode. Trump's legal troubles are mounting, international allies are losing confidence in American leadership, and the entire Republican Party is fracturing over the question of whether Trump is worth defending anymore. This is not a minor political skirmish. This is a battle for the future of the presidency, the future of the Republican Party, and the future of American democracy itself. And it's happening right now in real time behind closed doors on Capitol Hill and intense conversations across Washington. The stakes could not be higher. If Trump survives this, he'll be weakened but still in power. And the next 2 years will be defined by constant warfare between the White House and Congress. If he doesn't survive, we're looking at a transfer of power that would reshape American politics for a generation. Either way, the decisions being made in the next few days and weeks will have consequences that echo for years, possibly decades. This is the kind of moment that gets studied in history books, the kind of moment where individual choices by individual lawmakers determine the course of a nation. And right now, those lawmakers are deciding whether they're willing to sacrifice their own careers to stop a president they believe has gone too far. Watch closely. This story is far from over, and what happens next could define the next decade of American politics.